Hi, it's Dr. Games with another Gamer Skills video. Thanks for watching today. Today's video is about the music production process that's used by Dr. G and the Rain Shadows by our parent company, the Zalendorian Embassy. This is an overview summary video. We're going to get into more details in future videos. We're going to discuss a process flow diagram, or at least use that as our basis, and the link to download the picture of that process chart is in the comments below. We're going to use the same process flow as our guidelines for all of the videos in the music production series. As we get started, I want you to know that I'm putting aside any arguments about whether music composition is more of an art or a science. Let's suffice it to say that it's a mix of both. So, how does Dr. G begin the song process? Once you get into music production, you find that ideas for songs can come at any time. Whether you want to use a portal recorder, a scoring sketchpad, or even scribble notes on paper, you should be ready to capture your ideas at any time. Dr. G uses all three methods to capture song ideas. Depending on how the ideas are captured, you will use different methods for converting the music into manipulatable, easy for me to say, shareable form. That's really important. So having something scribbled on a notepad and only you are the only person in the world who can understand it does not make it shareable music. For our purposes, music is stored in really one of three forms. It's either in something like in an electronic form. It's either in something like a MIDI file, or it's in something like music XML file, or it's in another symbolic form that can be shared between programs and printed out, etc. In the writing world, they say that there is no such thing as good writing, there's only good rewriting, and unless you're Mozart, the same is true in music. A single musical phrase or melody can be rewritten a dozen times as we go into the production process. Our goal at the Zalendorian Embassy is to tease out the defined keys, chords, and musical phrases in a MIDI format. If it's a well-formed idea, then you might say that you get a song structure out of that initial idea. If it's a recorded musical idea, then we use Celemony Melodyne to create MIDI tracks. For iPad sketches, the Symphony profile is imported into the PC using iTunes and then converted to MIDI using either Scorefilter or Finale. For handwritten ideas, Scorefilter is the tool of choice, and we'll cover the specific use of these tools in future videos. At a minimum, at this point, you have a musical phrase or a melody fragment in MIDI format. This is where some science occurs. If you have a reasonable basis for the melody, I recommend that you go ahead and use the science part of music to develop the harmony, counterpoint, rhythm, bass, and ornamentation. Why do all that? Well, it gives you a feel for how the whole song might sound. deadmau5 talks about a Tinker Toy set of music fragments. What you'll find when you put those song elements together as a song sketch is that some of the parts are things that you'll want to pull out and keep whether you use them in this specific song or not. Now you go into the truly creative process of rewriting, testing, and revising again. Getting inputs from others is very useful at this point. Also, sometimes the best thing to do is to put something aside, rest your mind and ears, and then come back to the song fresh later. I want to emphasize how the science and art parts of music play off of one another. Going back to the chord structure, cadences, etc., you keep on going when your creative spring seems dry. Let me talk for a moment about critics at this point as well. One of my favorite stories of all time, I started writing my first songs back in 2002, and at that time, Dr. G was a single dad with three relatively young kids at home, but getting toward the tween years at the very least. And they had latched on to rap music. Even you rap aficionados will admit that not all rap is created equal. And probably the rap that my tweens were listening to in the early 2000s is probably not the cream of the crop of what you'd listen to today, suffice it to say. Again, different people have different views of art, etc. But the kids were very harsh critics of mine, probably because I was their dad and I was a single parent, and they said, "Dad, your music's terrible." They actually used different words, but I've gentrified it up a little bit here. And so I said, "Oh, well, what kind of music do you like?" And they said, "Oh, we like this kind of music." I listened to a couple of their songs that they played for me, and I said, I think I could actually compose and produce one of those songs from the beginning to the end in 10 minutes. And they said, no way. Besides, even if you did, it'd be terrible. I said, I suspect that your friends, who I transport around, since there was one car, one of me and 3 of them, I transported a lot of their friends around. I said, I bet that your friends wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Well, lo and behold, my son said, go. So, clickety-clack, I used some very, very basic programs at the time. I used some Music Right, and I used a synth by, I don't even remember anymore, but it's been a long time. I think it was the FM7 synth. And I think it was Magic's Music Maker, whatever one of the very early ones was. And I put a bunch of things together, and it was 9 minutes and 38 seconds. And I put that song in amongst a bunch of the other rap songs that the kids liked, and I had a CD that I would stick in the car. And we'd drive along, and the kids in the back seat would be bebopping along with the music and humming along, and all of a sudden, my rap song would come on, and they would be nodding their heads and snapping their fingers, and they would say to my kids, "Oh, who is this?" And my children would very angrily look at me as I looked at them smiling in the rearview mirror and say, "Oh, nobody you know." So what's my point with that? My point is that not that I was an awesome rap artist. The point is that I take that style and create something credible based on the science of music. Another example is I had a friend who was he was turning 85 years old. The guy had everything. And I said, I want to really celebrate your birthday. What can I do for you? He said, write me a song. And I said, well, what kind of music do you like? And he's like, I love bluegrass. Well, I never, ever thought about writing a bluegrass song. But I picked up 3 CDs and I listened, front to back of it and several times. And I got a feel for what bluegrass music consists of, what kind of instruments, what kind of chordal structure, what was the beat like, how do they do transitions, how many verses, how do they do choruses, intros, outros. I wrote him a bluegrass song, which you have maybe heard on one of our albums. I think it's come out on 2 albums now, called Ever Upward, which is, by the way, the most popular downloaded songs. I think we're up above 50,000 downloads for that song at this point. That wasn't because I'm a long-term bluegrass composer. It's because you could use the science of music to recreate a sound and make it pleasing. So is there some creativity involved? Yeah, the creativity is to come up with the basic beat, initial chordal structure, and how those 2 things interplay from my perspective. But then knowing how to make things sound harmonious, how to create chords that are leading and continuing and concluding or ending, there's a tremendous amount of science to all that. So now, once you take those MIDI versions or music XML units for all the tracks, at the Zellendron Embassy, we use Finale, which is a wonderful program by Make Music to create scores that can be given to musicians who actually lay down the tracks. And to this point, none of our songs have been recorded as large orchestrations. What do I mean by that? We've never had large orchestras together all playing at once in the way of famous Hollywood composers. What we do is we'll lay down individual tracks. Usually I create a click track, and then the tracks tend to be recorded individually and then edited and mixed. Now, you start this step with the MIDI versions and hard copy scores at each part, and we routinely produce those click tracks, or sometimes a click track with harmony or bass, for the musicians to use as reference when playing. We found out that this is largely a personal preference for the individual musicians. In other words, some people like you to have a supporting score in the background. Some just want the click track. It depends. There are many ways to find musicians. Craigslist, Backpage, notes at local studios, meetup groups, and a host of other methods can be used to find musicians. If you go to Southwest Music Festival, if you go to New Orleans, close to Mardi Gras, I found that you could have people sign a quick contract, give them $20, and they'd be willing to play a riff for you or something. And I found that to be a wildly effective way of getting creative material for the music. One critical caution is that you should use contracts. Even when I'm walking up to a street musician, I've always got a very short form contract for people to sign. There's some online resources for developing contracts, and this, on my part, is not official legal advice. Wait, let me say that again. This is not official legal advice, but on our contracts, we always try to include release and use of the performed music once performed. The recorded work belongs to the Salvadoran Embassy, full stop. The expectation in terms of the products and pay, and then publicity concerns. Usually the Salvadoran Embassy buys the right to use the performance video and some still photos for publicity. Usually what we do is we double the amount that we're paying for the song. One lesson learned is pay session musicians for the session, not before. That's all I'm going to say about that. The audio version shown here is the click track, as discussed earlier, and each musician's different, as I said. You should tailor the click tracks and sheet music for the musicians. This part will rest heavily on your people skills. Then the recording takes place. The best equipment you can obtain with your budget is what you should be using. You can work wonders with post-processing, but the cleaner your initial recording is, the better your final product will be, full stop. Also, the less work you'll have to do. Generally, we have our musicians lay down a track 4 or 5 times. Now you have all the tracks and takes in digital form. At the Salvadoran Embassy, we use Pro Tools to do the mixing. Now you can use other tools inserted in the flow here and there to edit and clean the tracks, etc. Examples would be Celemony Melodyne, Magic's Music Editor, FFmpeg, and other tools are frequently employed to trim, denoise, correct individual takes, or convert from one form to another. An example would be one of the systems we use, and I can talk more about that when we get to the recording video, records in an Apple format, and all of our workstations are PC, IBM Intel based, my mighty Z800, which I've had for years and years and years now and still going strong. And actually I have a 2003 computer that's got some truly ancient hardware in it that's also very, very good for multi-track recording. I have to use FFmpeg to translate, in the electrical engineering business we call it filter, from the Apple format into the PC format. So once the finalized tracks are complete, a WAV version is used in other programs. So for example, a final version, it's far more likely nowadays than an MP3 because that's the way we distribute songs. Some of the folks like CD Baby still will take waves at 44 kilohertz and 16 bits. And then if you want to create a CD, you also want to do it at 44 kilohertz, 16-bit resolution. And then if you're doing a movie track, then you're going to want to use 48 kilohertz and 16 or 24 bits. On the other hand, if you want to do a Blu-ray soundtrack, then you can potentially have fidelity, at 96 kilohertz or even higher, and you can also do things in surround sound, etc. The Salvadoran Embassy has the capability to do really everything up to 7.1 in terms of surround sound in every format, from DTS to Dolby Digital to surround sound waves, etc., and even some of the newer formats for the film industry, DCP, etc. If the final product is a surround sound file, part of the video produced or something else, WAV files can be put into other finishing tools like Sony Acid, Sony Vegas, FFmpeg, OpenDCP, etc., etc., etc. Now you can see the variety of products that the Salvadoran Embassy has created. One caveat is that I highly recommend taking steps to copyright your materials. Dr. G belongs to ASCAP, and there are other professional organizations that represent musicians and help to collect revenue for performances of your music. Okay, that wraps up things for this video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider giving a thumbs up, and as always, you are welcome to subscribe. If you really want to help out and you enjoy hearing more about music production and sound production and audio work, please look at the links below and head by our store and go ahead and download some, or even buy a CD maybe. Or you can always stream if you have a streaming service. Every little bit helps. Thank you very much and have a great day.